Good afternoon, colleagues. The first, I would like to thank from organization of this conference, and so thanks for hosting in Korea. This lecture is experience of me and my colleagues for digitizing manuscripts at the library at Tehran University. Central Library and Documentation Center, University of Tehran, is the largest academic library in Iran and includes a rich and extensive collection of various sources in different fields of science, about 1 million records. Manuscripts. In the collection of manuscripts, there are precious, artistic, old, original, and unique copies, and with the script of scholars and famous people. This exclusive collection covers topics from Persian and Arabic literature, jurisprudence, theology, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, history, and geography. The oldest manuscript with the correct date available in this collection was written in 1086 AD. All existing manuscripts have been listed in the 21-volume catalog. And the list of manuscripts is searchable online at the library website. Historical documents. The Central Library has 100,000 folios historical documents. They include commandments, announcements, and sale deeds, endowments, marriage contracts, and financial documents, and so on. The oldest document of this collection was written in 1460 AD. Works which have been registered in the Memory of the World program. In the years in which Iran has registered works in the Memory of the World program, 3 manuscripts from the Central Library have been registered nationally, regionally, and internationally. A copy of Khamse Nizami was registered as the oldest dated copy in 2011. Vendidad was registered in the Memory of the World program in the Asia and Pacific region in 2014, and after registration, it was noticed greatly by many researchers in Iran and Europe. This copy had a facsimile printing in Iran and was placed in the collection of digital archive of University of Salamanca. Zakhireh Khwarezmshahi was nationally registered in 2013. The process of digitalization of the manuscripts in the Central Library. This library was the first institute in Iran which, for the sake of protection of its archive sources and documented heritage, take action to take image of them. Purchasing devices for producing microfilming process in 1956, attempts were made to take photo from the manuscripts. Of course, Due to the fact that the provision of microfilm was a costly and time-consuming work, so that during 45 years, only 6,000 reel of microfilms were repaired. Of the copies, which include 1 million frames. In 2000, the first scanner device was entered into the library, and since then, the manuscripts and archival documents were scanned, but this work was being done in a low volume. In 2010, through a vast project with constant working and preparing more devices, all manuscripts of the library were scanned in 1 year. 16,000 manuscripts include 34,000 records and 3 million files. Digitalization policies and strategies. There are three basic elements in digitalization process upon which all of our planning should be based: contents, software, and services. These three elements were noticed in the execution process continuously. The strategy of the Central Library for digitalization of the sources in place within the following framework. Selection of sources for digitalization. In order to fulfill the long-term objectives and defined strategies of the Central Library, the digitalization of sources were prioritized, and on this basis, the manuscripts were prioritized in respect of their rareness and thematic and research significance. Amid the manuscripts, those which were older and more subject and damage were given priority. By the way, the demands of the clients were also considered, and the sources which were on demand were given priority as well. Preparation for digitalization. The scan of sources in the beginning of the project was started with this slogan: each source is scanned only once. Therefore, much carefulness was made to prevent placing a source in the scanner. Of course, during the project was faced with some problems which could diminish the speed of the work. For example, one of our objectives of digitalization was to protect the original copies. During the scanning, we learned that some of the copies have no capability to be scanned. The papers were fragile. Some binding could not be opened, and there sometimes there were worn out copies too. So we talked to the experts of renovation. Sometimes they were forced to open the book binding. Sometimes this process should not be done, in particular in the case of very valuable copies. Therefore, an expert of photography used to take photo of them by a camera. This project was performed without any slight damage on the copies. Digitalization place. Moving the manuscript from for scanning was one of our problems. The long distance of the treasures of manuscripts with the place of scanners could impose damage of copies during movement. Every day, a great number of manuscripts were being transferred to the digital section from treasures by a special rare carrier. We came to this conclusion that it is better to install the scanner beside the manuscript treasures by the end of the project. Therefore, one of the neighboring halls near treasures was completed, and with the help of the experts of the logistics supporting company and experts of computer of the library, the scanners were installed in place. This made to prevent any damage on the manuscripts to a great extent. Technical equipment and applications. One of the media which have called the attention of many of experts and information specialists through the world is to use the capabilities and facilities of the web. The digital archive occurs in the internet virtual environment. In order to establish this virtual environment, there is a need to specific hardware and software facilities. This equipment include the promoted computers, book scanners, professional cameras, and vast internet network. With the support of authorities of the university and in association with some of the other libraries, we could provide these facilities. In the course of project, we were constantly in contact with the logistics supporting companies of scanners to prevent any diminution in the quality of performance of the scanners. Organization and description. This issue was important to us to have a strategic selection and to use software which could be in agreement with the international standards. In recent years, we learned that the software of the library does not have our concerned capabilities. Consequently, we decided to change it. We started studying the software which were available in Iran. More than anything else, in the period of selection of software, being in agreement with standards was significant, and finally we select Iranian software which was based on MARC standard. In the transfer of metadata, sometimes we were facing with the fall of metadata. For this very reason, in the past month, we have been dealing with the purification of the metadata in the new software. These alterations occur in the software and hardware inevitably. Despite the fact that we have always tried to act in agreement with standards. This is also a risk for our data during digitalization. The order of organization of physical materials was kept so that their attachment to the metadata was simple. adherence to standards. The digitalization policy, which we considered, can be posed into in two dimensions: structural standards and conceptual standards. Data storage and retrieval. We have noticed to the use of digital technology as a possible alternative for old carrier-like microframes. But we do not know how the digital carriers will respond for the long-term maintenance. One of the current problems in our library is that we do not have a device to read microfiche. Many years ago, our device had a failure, and we have not found any company to repair it. Anyway, there is this fear that one day the system which is used for storing and retrieval of digital sources might face with the same fate. Data is stored in university storage and on the tape. Of course, there is a second data center in another place. By the way, we have a server in the library to open, which we store all data. That is to say that our data is stored in 3 places. Budget is very important, and we are very problem with it. And preservation. We need the standards of digital preservation to be able to store the sources forever and share these stored sources digitally. We know that the protection of physical sources in the traditional view emphasizes only on the duration of the life of the media, but when protection is place-based digital, it will enjoy a greater vital significance, not only due to the difference and complexity of the information and communication technologies, but also due to its link with the metadata management had higher organization and policy aspects. We are always facing this challenge that if we do not manage our data, probably we will lose them. The problems which all of us know for the protection of digital documents, such as the oldness of the technology, and data migration, change in formats, complexity of data coding also existed in this work, and definitely the use of international standards will diminish these damages. Humanities resources planning and its development. In the Central Library, most of the human forces are comprised of librarians, and of course many of them do not try to move ahead with modern technologies. But when the software of the library was changed, it was necessary for all librarians to have a retraining. Therefore, all individuals were trained to work with the new system through diverse classes and workshops. We decided to repeat these educations every year to have our human forces updates. However, the experts of software in our library are not so many, and it is necessary to fill this gap, which obviously due to the cost. And the moment, no work has been done on it. And intellectual property rights and accessibility policy. We are forced to classify the access to the digital documents with regards to the regulation of the central library, public, specific, and special access. Expansion and protection through web. At present, the metadata related to the manuscript and their digital copies are retrievable on the site of Central Library. Now, 10,000 copies of manuscripts are placed on the site of the Digital Library in the Garden of Knowledge, is the name, database. And the researchers can buy their concert copies online. We hope that by the next 2 months, we could present all manuscript copies on the web to the researchers, and of course, after that time, terms for the other sources. Finally, as I said earlier, our desire is to prepare a common base of available manuscripts copies in Iran to be at the disposal of all researchers in all parts of the world, and we are taking necessary steps towards these objectives. Certainly, the use of the experience of our collections, of our colleagues in other countries can bring to us to our objective much faster. Thank you for your attention.